Trains. They fascinate young and old alike. Maybe it's the size and power of the locomotive, or maybe it's the understanding that trains played such an important part in building our nation. Whatever the reasons, the sights and sounds of trains have a way of grabbing our attention and capturing our imagination. And the old steam-driven trains that we admire and even ride on in museums do something more. They remind us of a time when personal travel and the transportation of products was simpler, slower, and safer. Today, the picture is more complicated. Fast-moving trains now travel on thousands of miles of track, linking our towns, cities, and states as they deliver every conceivable product. And at the same time, millions of fast-moving cars and trucks are traveling our nation's roads, roads that intersect our nation's railroads in tens of thousands of locations. It's where road and railroad meet that we have the potential for disaster.
Hello, I'm Sergeant Frank Pierce of the Michigan State Police. The crashes we just saw were staged, but they dramatically demonstrate the destructive potential of car-train crashes, a potential that becomes reality thousands of times every year.
Nationally, there are usually over 6,000 car-train crashes every year, with over 2,400 injured and 600 killed. Right here in our own Michigan communities, we see well over 200 car-train crashes every year. And here's the frightening part. These crashes are almost 24 times more likely to result in a fatality compared with regular highway crashes. In other words, car-train crashes are just plain deadly.
Today, let's look at some of the reasons that these crashes happen and the many lives that are affected.
How is it that a driver can end up in the path of a train? Well, for many people, driving has become a secondary activity. They read maps, converse, listen to music, and because of their inattentiveness, they may not even see a crossing signal. But most people are simply impatient, and they would rather ignore signals and break the law than be inconvenienced. The close calls that happen when people run through signals are, unfortunately, a way of life for railroad engineers.
We see close calls just about every road trip that we make when we're traveling high speed, and it's a scary experience because no one wants to hurt anybody out there. We're just out here trying to do our jobs. When I'm coming to a railroad crossing, I'm blowing that whistle. I've got my headlight on bright. I've got that bell ringing. I try to give them every opportunity to know that I'm coming and to protect themselves. The only thing that comes to mind why people take these chances is everybody is at a high pace of life. You know, everyone's got some place to go, and everyone's always running late. And unfortunately, people will take chances when they fall behind on like a daily schedule. But when it comes to railroads, you're taking a chance going across a railroad crossing if a train's coming, because you're bound to be a loser eventually.
The loss of 6 young people has a great impact. This is the local newspaper this afternoon. The pictures of the 6 victims of the crash above their crashed car, and then the grief-stricken family and friends down underneath.
Investigators tonight tell Eyewitness News friends of the 6 students did not think there'd been too much drinking. More likely, police say, Randy Haas just tried to beat the train across.
It's routine in this part of town, where everyone on that side of the tracks gets cut off every time a freight train rolls through. Even the lone eyewitness who sat here and watched the collision from his truck says he had a notion to beat the train, but judged he couldn't. 6 teenagers who passed him proved he was right.
A moment of impatience and 6 teenagers are dead. But let's be honest, who hasn't been guilty of the same impatience? Most of us, police officers included, have experienced that sinking feeling when we see the gates coming down ahead of us and we're in a hurry. At that moment, trains can become a serious hindrance, and no one is perhaps as likely to take a chance of beating the train as a police officer en route to an emergency.
Trooper Steve Newick and his partner James DeLoach were killed late last night when their patrol car collided with a train.
There was an off-duty officer that had called for assistance, and that's what they were responding to.
The crash occurred in Oakland County, Scott Lake Road and Dixie Highway. Waterford Township Police are investigating, but right now it appears the 2 troopers just didn't see the train.
The lights were flashing on the train crossing, the gates were down, other cars were stopped. They proceeded left of the vehicles in front of them and appeared apparently to hesitate before entering the tracks. Once they were upon the tracks, they were struck broadside by the train.
Something like this tragedy, kind of a wake-up call. Okay, is it worth it? Okay, and I'm not saying don't go all out to help your fellow man, but give it just a second thought. Just a second thought.
Why is it so hard to get people to understand the danger involved? For one thing, many people really don't understand how long it takes to stop a train. This train is a half-mile away. If it slammed on its brakes now, it would still hit the camera and everything in between.
A lot of people think you can stop a train just like you can an automobile, but it can't be done. It takes a long time to stop a train.
In fact, a 150-car train traveling 50 miles per hour will need as much as 1.5 miles to stop. The train you're looking at now has been in full emergency brake since the moment it reached the crossing. Here's another problem. People do not understand how difficult it is to judge the distance and speed of an oncoming train. Can you tell how far away or how fast this train's going? Of course, a slow-moving train still represents tremendous force. A railroad buff was taping this train when directly behind him, a semi pulled right in front of a second freight train. Even at this slow speed, the force of the train is incredible.
We've seen how drivers, including police officers, are putting themselves at risk at railroad crossings. But we should also remember that railroad employees, every time they make a run, are being put in a position of worrying over the lives of others, and in some cases, they're living in fear for their own lives.
I would venture to say that if you talk to, I'd say, almost every engineer, in the back of their mind, there's 2 things that we absolutely do not want to have a crash with. That would be a tank truck with possibly propane or gasoline, something that would be highly flammable, or a school bus.
Here's a moment of horror for a train crew and a near catastrophe captured by an amateur photographer. Watch how close the train comes to hitting this gasoline tanker. If the engineer had begun braking a second later, or the truck driver had slowed down, they, along with the photographer, would all be dead.
You can come up to the white fire truck here, and we would ask that you do not go past that point because it will melt your camera. I've been up there. It's very hot right there.
In this crash, a tanker truck slammed into the side of a train, and the driver lost his life. The train's crew escaped injury because the crash wasn't head-on. But Ike Spink, a train employee of 11 years, was visibly shaken when asked what he would say to other drivers.
If people would use this for an example and just look and listen before they cross a railroad track, whether it's got lights, signals, or crossbucks, it still means the same thing. It means that a train could be used in that track, and this is a sad day for all of us, and that's really all I'd like to say.
I hope you better understand now the dangers represented by railroad crossings and the fact that all drivers and railroad employees are at risk. I also hope that when driving, you'll always exercise caution at crossings. Trust me, the few minutes you may save trying to beat a train just aren't worth it. And please understand that the laws regulating crossing traffic are there for one reason and one reason alone, to save lives. Thanks for listening and drive carefully.